Welcome everyone to our number, let's just say XX, Coffee and Careers in Animal Science. Today's session is on professional etiquette, his and hers. We have three guests from, I want to say DuPont, but I have to say IFF now. So we have Dr. Ana de Souza, Greg Puckett, and Dr. Janet Remus from IFF. They work in technical sales and sales. And we have a swine veterinarian, a swine nutritionist, and a poultry salesman, account manager.
Yeah. He actually, Greg is both today.
Swine and poultry.
Swine and poultry, even better. Yay! So Ana got her master's degree in zoo and tech in working on animal production with a poultry department in Brazil. And she was with Provimi for 6 years. And then she came and received a PhD from the University of Kentucky with Dr. Lindemann. And in 2004, she went back to Vitagre, if I say that right.
Vitagre, yeah.
Yeah.
And what you say is fine.
Worked there for 2 years. And then she came on in 2007 with Murphy Brown. And that's kind of where I met Ana back in the day, is as a nutritionist there. And now she is with DuPont, now Danisco Animal Nutrition at IFF for over 2 years. And she's a technical service working there with the swine industry. Greg Puckett had a BS from poultry science at UGA, one of the top poultry, universities in the US, I would say, if not world. He's worked 16 years in the poultry processing, including 7 years at a plant manager level. So he's got experience from the plant side of things into now he's a key account manager for swine and poultry for both DuPont and Danisco Animal Health, or Animal Nutrition, sorry. And we have a wrong name here. I think I probably downloaded the wrong one. This is Dr. Janet Remus, though, and she is the Senior Technical Director of Danisco Animal Nutrition in North America. She grew up in Western Nebraska on a farm and a ranch, has a Bachelor's of Science from University of Nebraska in Agriculture and Animal Science. Her master's and PhD was at the University of Missouri in Poultry Nutrition and Physiology. She served in product development and research and development, as well as technical service roles. She's a great person to know in the industry. I've met Janet from different committees we've served on through AFIA and different things like that. And she is probably one of the leading enzyme experts, I would say, in our industry. And so she's kind of been one of my role models that I've looked up to in my career. So it is a pleasure to have all of you here. And thank you as well, Danisco Animal Nutrition and IFF, for sponsoring Coffee and Careers. So with that, this way this works for a few of us that are new on the call. If you have questions for our speakers, please feel free to put them in the chat feature. We may ask you to come off mute and maybe video as well to have some dialogue. But I think it's really kind of unique, Greg. I kind of want to understand your background a little bit more. You've worked at the plant level and now in key account manager. Can you kind of talk about that transition and what that, from a professional, some of the nuances and challenges that's been for you?
Well, thank you. The plant manager level, I was over the processing facility. So we had I had 8 managers and about 15 to 16 supervisors, and about 800 employees. And I was responsible for when the birds arrived on the property until they left in a truck. So there are a lot of different entities to manage, and it was more of a leadership position, so that when I transitioned to what I'm doing now, my first instinct was not to try to sound bossy, because I was concerned I was going to inadvertently start telling people what to do when I was the new person. So I was cognizant of that, but I thought I was going to miss the leadership roles I had, but you should be a leader to anybody. All leadership means is influence. So I try to lead the customers. I try to lead the people I work for. So it hasn't been that big a change from that as I was fearing it would be. So I have enjoyed that, and then swapping over to getting more swine is another group of people to work with. So I've enjoyed that as well.
Awesome. Anna, talk about some of the, as we talk about etiquette, and I've been listening to some different podcasts and stuff as I drive across the country. And we were talking about even language differences and cultures, even within language, on, misunderstandings because of how we say things, or combining the word with the, as I said, the body language, I think, and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about some of the struggles you've had being a female, and we've had many conversations on this, and being from Brazil, and how that, went to different cultures, in that you've struggled, or I guess challenges that you've had to work through.
Ooh, there is a lot of stories. I'm going to try to summarize a little bit, but when I finished, keep in mind that when you're talking about the vet school in Brazil is not a doctoral degree like it is in the US. So you finish high school and you take a test to go to the university. So I went to the university and got was selected in the course that I wanted, which was veterinary. And I finished the course, I was 21 years old. So I was very young. And some people thought that I was 15 years old. So it was really, really hard to get a job, because people will look at me as like, what do you know? You're a child. What are you talking about working, So it was very challenging in that sense. I will have to say that I am, my partner says that I am extremely persistent or stuck on things. I would tell him that I am persistent. If I was not persistent, I would not have been through my life where I've been and get where I am today, because of all the difficulties that I have. Also, during the time that I was in Brazil, there was, when I finished college, there was a very extreme difficulty in terms of the economy. If you think about, people talk about me about crisis here, and oh, the crisis here is horrible. It's like, okay, think about having an inflation of 80% a month. And then we talk about crisis again. Okay. I remember that was the inflation in March of 1992 in Brazil. So your life changed completely that way. You think like, okay, this month I'm going to pay these bills, not those bills. And you have to manage your life like that, because every day you go to the supermarket, the tickets that they mark the price are different. The prices were changing every day or within the same day. So that creates also a different type of contest for you to live in. When I finished vet school, I tried to work. It was difficult to get work because of the economy and a lot of several different things. Until the final point, I got a job when I finished my master's, which I finished in 1994, which was 80 years after I finished vet school. On that time, I worked, and the person that was my supervisor, he said, oh no, you cannot go visit customers. They don't want to see a woman. So this was 1993, and it was like that still. So I went through that for several times. There were times that I was working and there were like 30 men and me in the company. And so it was interesting because I heard all kinds of conversations from them, and they said like, you have no filter what you talk in front of me. So you know that I'm going to meet your family at some point. So be careful there. Anyway, but it was a different life at that time. I was able to visit some customers because of different conditions, and I was well received and everything worked well. And I think the way it works is that depends on how you present yourself, not how people look at you. If you are a very quiet person, it's going to be very difficult for you to be good at serving someone in a customer that they may get a man or a woman. And I think that if you present yourself that I know what I'm talking about. If I don't know, I know where to find someone that will help us. So I think it went well over the years. And of course, you get experience and move on. Talking about the language, I don't know if you have ever noticed, but people that speak Romance languages like Spanish or Portuguese, they are going to change she and he all the time when they are learning English, which is quite normal. I remember many years that I did that. And there were a lot of issues also. I taught English for several years. Even when I was at Smithfield, I taught manager trainees because I realized that when you cannot hear some sounds that they are not part of your language, you cannot speak them. Like the th sound in English, we don't have that in Portuguese or Spanish. So teaching these people to be more functional. It doesn't need to be a perfect English, but to be more functional so people will understand them when they are speaking will make their life so much easier. And I believe that is one thing that it still needs a little bit of effort, because I've seen people that they live in the US for like 8-10 years and they are not speaking English yet, which I think it's crazy in my mind. Anything else that you want to know?
Well, I was going to say, if it makes you feel any better, rolling the R's, it's very challenging for me in Spanish. So.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, that is easy for us.
Anyway. Yeah, I was going to say, Janet, are you able to, I'm curious to hear your perspectives of challenges throughout your career. I would assume it's very similar to Anna's of being one of the few females in the room at times.
Well, yes and no. Actually, when I started working in the industry, I was based in Europe, and it was fairly common to see female nutritionist, technical service people. But in that role that I had at that time as product manager, I went internationally quite a lot. And at that time in Asia, it was uncommon to see females in management roles. And even after I moved back to the United States, still relatively uncommon. So through my career, I had both the opportunity and the challenge to learn to work with people who may or may not have been used to the way women think. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got actually came from an elder statesman nutritionist here in the US. He said, never be shy about putting your opinion forward, but do it respectfully and diplomatically. And that's always been something I've tried to live up to, maybe not always successfully, but it is a good rule of thumb. We cannot be shy in putting what we think out there, but you have to put it in a framework that will resonate with the people you are talking to. So try to be diplomatic, try to frame it in a way that it gets the message across without as much emotional baggage as we may be feeling at the moment. I got to say, I've had a lot of opportunities to interact with people through the years. And one of the things that's always amused me a little bit, because it's so different from where I grew up in Western Nebraska, is how you refer to people in positions of authority. You know, even here in the US, going to the South, you see a lot of Mr. and Miss, or even Dr., you know, Dr. Janet, Dr. Anna, Miss Anna, you know, all those kinds of honorifics are very regional. And for me, growing up in Western Nebraska, I wasn't there. If you were being formal with somebody, you used Mrs. Remus or Dr. Remus or Mr. Puckett. You did not use that first name with an honorific. So that was something regional wise that I needed to learn to adapt to as I went down south and worked with nutritionists and clients there. But you even see that in Asia. It's fairly typical that you will see an honorific and a first name used there. Some countries more than others, but it's not an unusual practice. So be adaptable and kind of familiarize yourself a little bit with what is the local norm. Because if you can get your point across using an etiquette that everyone you're talking to is familiar with, you'll be much more successful.
And I would agree, Janet, that even in South America, people will call, like, it will be very rare someone call me Dr. de Souza there. It's Dr. Ana. That's the way people will say.
I prefer Casey, but that's, you know. No, I mean, it was really interesting listening to this Hidden Brain episode on NPR talking about language. And another etiquette and things that have come up over this year, long pauses or pauses. And she was comparing New Yorkers to Californians. And the New Yorkers are, you know, talk a lot. They don't like, you know, long pauses. And basically, ultimately, from her research trial she ran on this, analyzing the conversation, that they excluded the Californians because they, you know, kept the conversation going because the pauses were too long. Greg, you've worked in a, you know, from the plant level managing to, you know, boardrooms and stuff on that. How do you manage the pauses? How do you make sure people get heard?
That's a good question, because you're always should be trying to listen. The problem I've run into in my career is when you have different people from all over in one boardroom. That's when people are talking over each other. It's even harder on Zoom calls. You know, I've had to kind of relearn and establish my own etiquette for a Zoom call, but it's a tendency for people to want to help somebody out when there's a pause and start finishing their sentences for them. And I've had to actually stop and say, hold on, let them try to finish this first before somebody just comes in and starts talking, because that, you know, interrupt somebody once or twice and they won't say anything again, you know, and then that it really affects your meetings going forward. So I even felt like I was the quarterback for the meetings when I wasn't leading the meeting. When I saw somebody trying to get something out, or somebody struggling with a word, or like you said, from different areas, there's some people can't handle those long stretches because they get antsy on themselves. So I just try to come in there and settle people down and say, well, hold on, take your time, and let somebody try to finish that. But the pauses can be very uncomfortable. But you almost have to come in and rescue people in those situations.
It's funny you say that, Greg, because I'm kind of hearkening back to my experiences living in Finland. And there's a real cultural aspect there. And talking with Finns or other Eastern Europeans, you get a different perspective on what silence means, because for people who use a minimal amount of words to get the point across, they tend to find how we as Americans speak excessively wordy, that we always have to keep talking. And that in and of itself kind of becomes a question of how you approach that from an etiquette standpoint, because there is that fundamental difference.
That's a good point. I've seen that as well.
Yeah. One other comment that I'll make it, I had an extremely hard time when I came to the US because in Brazil, most situations where I was, we would be speaking in, especially in my family, everybody speaks at the same time. And we get to understand each other. Don't ask me how, but that's the way it is. So it's like, blah, 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 everybody at the same time. So when I came and I had to wait, I never could get to the right point that I would speak, I'll be able to speak and express my ideas. And if I didn't express my ideas, I would forget. I would not remember what it was. So that was horrible for me. It took me a really long time to get over that. That was for sure.
I'll throw this in there as well. I've told people over the years, you've got to read the room, because depending on what's going on and the tenor, sometimes you don't want to say anything right then because you're going to waste your time and nobody's going to actually hear you. So how I've said things in meetings has varied on. I was judging people's reactions and their body language. I have at times come into an office to talk to a manager, and I saw he was having a bad day, but I had something I had to let him know was going to occur to him, and I would say, "Let me come back later, because you're not in the mood to hear this right now." So I mean, it's trying to be that. I hate to say feelings, but a lot of professional etiquette is being concerned about people's feelings and make them comfortable to work with you. You want them to continue to come back like a repeat customer. I can trust Greg. Let me go back and tell him this problem when he would have covered it up otherwise. So.
I would say one other thing that is related to that too, right? Because when I was working in Brazil, I was not over the people that work in the plant because we work making premixes, feeds, special diets for young pigs and different products. When there was a problem in production, they would come and talk to me, which I think I created that over the years that I worked with that team, because I worked with them 6 years. Then I came and did my PhD and went back and worked 2 more years with them. They knew that they would come and talk to me, and they would be well received, and they would know that I would listen to what they have to tell me, and we're going to work together to find a solution for the problem that they have in production. And I would go with them and show them different ways that we could find how to fix that problem. And that is a very important thing in that sense. When you work with the people that they might not be under you, but they are under you in terms of quality or whatever it is that you're working. It is absolutely important to let people know that the door is open for you to come and talk to me whenever you need. Don't be afraid, because I saw another colleague that was working there when I came back after my PhD, that they were not talking to him. And I said, I'm afraid when the people in the plant doesn't come here to tell you when something went wrong in production. You need to know. And you cannot be extremely or punitive or any kind of behavior of that type with them, because you are going to create a bigger problem for yourself.
This one final thing you made me think of it. Not to take up too much time on this one question, but you're exactly right. Nothing I've told people is don't punish honesty. They'll stop telling you anything else ever again. Absolutely. And then honesty's your friend. So.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, because in working with people, you're only as successful as people are comfortable in working with you. So part of etiquette is really being accessible and respecting of opinions, that whether you agree with them or not doesn't really matter, but as long as you give that opportunity for those people to express thoughts, feelings, ideas, it'll be better for everybody in the end.
Casey, Janet, and Greg, I think that is not only has to be referred to the people that you work in the company that you work, but with the customers that you work.
True.
If you don't create that kind of relationship with your customers, they don't need, eventually they don't need to be that close to you, but they have to trust you, and you can trust them too. So you can talk openly about the different things that happen. So your business is going to move a lot easier that way than if there is some restriction there.
You're exactly right. And those sorts of relationships are critical in becoming really a trusted advisor type functionality with that client. And if you want to be strictly transactional, then you can be pretty minimal on how you approach customers and what you give them as far as time and etiquette and relationship. But if you want your business to ever grow beyond the mere transaction, then you need to do exactly what Anna has outlined to really get that basement built to where you can put the foundation on the building and get that relationship up to that trusted advisor role that is so critical to success in business.
Success in life.
Yeah, your
True.
customers will come back to you to ask about questions that have nothing to do with the products that you sell, but they have to do with your experience.
With mine, with etiquette, you talked about leaving the boundaries open a little bit. How do you establish boundaries so you're comfortable also being in that relationship? Because sometimes I have had to push my, I don't know, necessarily moral, but boundaries that I'm comfortable in personally. How do you establish those without pushing people away?
I had I would say one relationship so far that there were issues in terms of what that person was saying about me and about my personal life, that it was not their business, and they didn't need to be talking about my life in a commercial meeting. So that was a difficult one, but I guess I knew enough of the person that I said, to tell you the truth, it doesn't matter what you think about my personal life. I am not here to talk about my personal life, and move on talking about what I was talking. But that was because there was a relationship with that person before that meeting. Otherwise, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going back to being open and honest. And there's got to be some trust there, or you can't do it anyway. But, I've had to tell people before, I hate being ambushed in a meeting.
Oh, yes.
I mean, if you're going to say, let's talk about this at 1 p.m. and organically goes to another subject, that's fine. But yeah, I've been invited to a meeting and gotten there, and there have been 8 VPs in the room, and they're playing whack-a-mole. There's constantly things coming from different areas, and I've actually had to stop and say, look, I feel overwhelmed right now. Let's do one subject at a time, then we'll go on to the next one. I can't just keep going back and forth. So, and they stopped.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped doing it because I just articulated what I needed, and they were respectful enough to try to meet that. And of course, they were very apologetic because they didn't mean to do that to me, but it happened too many times over too many years.
Yeah, I would say that this, Greg, is very important because sometimes when you are starting your career, you are afraid to speak, and to be able to say, "Hey, can you stop a moment? I cannot handle the situation the way it is. Let's go in a slower pace, or do whatever you have to do to follow the subjects, but without feeling that you have been kind of crucified by somebody else,
Especially when some of those subjects they're insinuating, and I'm still trying to answer something they asked me 10 minutes ago, and they've asked me 2 questions since then. I've just had to kind of take control and tell them this is what I need. And, and I try to go into with the mindset, I've got nothing to hide and nothing to prove, and just be open and honest. So, and that's easier said than done sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said. It is about, you get in that situation, letting folks know where your boundaries are and when you need to step back and just collect your thoughts and be ready to move on. There is certainly another avenue for folks earlier in their career, and that's really all about looking at mentors, both in your workplace and even out into the industry, to kind of help provide those sorts of social etiquette guidance, or even just a sounding board if you need one. And that can help too in those kinds of situations if you're uncomfortable in standing up in a meeting and saying, I really need this. And those kind of relationships can help you build that strength to do it if you are naturally a more reticent personality.
One other thing that I have to mention here is that sometimes I may have a question and I answer that question using my thought process at that moment, and it might be a very short answer. And usually when Janet is in the conversation, I would say, like, let's wait a little bit, because I am pretty sure that Janet is going to give an answer that will be elaborated enough that will settle this conversation. And sure enough, that's usually what happens.
Yeah, Anna, now you're building me up. I might not have such good luck in the future.
Oh,
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, but I have had, I would say that has been true for most of the time at this point.
Okay, we have a question for Lydia. She's going to unmute herself and ask Anna.
Okay.
Hello.
Oh.
Hello.
So for the three of you, but maybe more specifically to Dr. Souza. I am also from Brazil. My name is Lydia. I work in Brazil for 2 years, and then I came for my master's. Now I'm doing my PhD.
Okay.
What I don't have experience yet here is in the industry in the US. And so I was thinking, since you mentioned that you did your PhD here, what would you say was the biggest difference in terms of work environment between the university, that I think we have a lot of access to a lot of things. People are in general very welcoming. At least that's the way I felt here. And so what would be the biggest difference? And if not only difference, what were the biggest challenge on this moving from a PhD? I understood that you went from your PhD to work in Brazil, but then now in the US, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I would say that most likely depends on which company are you going to work for. Like if you are working for livestock production, the structure will be quite different. It, of course, depends on the size of the company, of course. But it was going to be different than if you go to a light industry that produces supplements or premixes or whatever kind of products. And you are in technical or R&D on those companies. So I think that the biggest thing that I would tell you that I really didn't know when I started here, but today for me is the most clear thing, is that whenever you go anywhere to work, you want to know the culture of the company, and you want to know how conversations flow in that group of people. Do you have the openness to talk about anything that you want to talk about that subject, or bring new ideas, and you are not going to be judged, or you are going to be judged? So these are things that I believe, for me at least, are extremely important. to make sure that I go to a place that, okay, I can live in this place and be happy doing this. If I go to a place that there is extreme, an extreme amount of judgment, or there are changes that they have, it is sometimes a refined change on what you have to do in your position, but they might involve a lot of things that you don't want to do. Like you like to work with people, to go and visit them and help in their issues, help them with the products, whatever it is. But you don't like that much to do all the things that are involved in R&D, as an example. So it's like, so they put like 50% of your time on both. It's like, oh man. So those are the things that if you want to learn and you want to increase your experience in those areas, yes, you can do that. But I would tell you that one of the first things, and I always ask that when I go to a place to work, is like, what about the culture in your company? How it is, how you feel about the company, how you feel working here, how long have you worked here? What are the challenges that you have? And that is one thing that people sometimes will tell you. They will tell you when you are in an interview, which is good because then you can make your choice if that is good for you or not. Does that respond to your question?
Yes, absolutely.
I was gonna say something. Janet, you would know her, Tara York Walsh.
Oh, definitely.
When I joined AB Vista, Tara and I were totally two different styles of technical service managers, and she made a good point to me, and it was good advice. Hindsight, it was good. She said, my first year, I was very quiet. I didn't say anything. I just sat back and watched and learned. Where, because she found me probably a little too aggressive at first, and maybe that's because I felt more so the conversations in that company was very poultry driven, and I'm here to join the company to grow the swine business, for instance. And so maybe I was a little more vocal, but I think that's a great piece of advice. I don't know if you got to wait a whole year, but I think Greg's mentioned it a little bit. Read the room, read the culture. You don't have to prove yourself right away. And listening, I guess, is a great skill. And not only listen with your ears, but with your eyes, right? And you'll kind of know, you'll pick up quickly of how people work with each other. And I think that's been very important, especially going across cultures. I can see where, Americans are offensive to certain cultures and vice versa. So sometimes it's good to be the quiet person in the room for a while.
And you bring up a very valid point, because in my experiences in doing a lot of work internationally, some cultures, they will always smile and look very attentive, but you got to watch their eyes, because the rest of the face may be engaged, but the eyes will tell you whether or not they are truly engaged. And that was one of those reading the rooms things that took me a while, because, here in the US, people are very expressive in how they are looking when you're presenting to them in a room, and if someone's bored. But you don't always know that in other cultures because of how they present respect to you as a speaker or an invited guest. So sometimes it can be very specific what you need to look for and what is going on behind the eyes, so to speak. I agree with what Ana was saying on experiences and company culture. But I would also put out there, be aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are, because sometimes as a job applicant or looking for that first key role, knowing those strengths will help guide you to what is the right first job for you, or avoiding the one that may not be a good learning experience, let's put it that way. And that is I think a good piece of advice for anybody starting that first job is really know what your strengths are and what you want out of a job. And if you can find something that gets most of those boxes ticked, you'll have a good first experience.
I like to throw in one more thing, and this is going to be a generalization. People have heard me say this before. Maybe where you work, like regionally, maybe a better way to put that is where the people are from that you're going to work with regionally. It's something to consider. It's been my experience, and again, this is a generalization, but I've worked with people from up north, the northern United States, and they had comfort in knowing I knew what I was talking about. I was qualified. Working with people in the southern United States, they wanted to work with somebody they could get along with. You would fit in, for lack of a better way to put it. So to give your, I say fit in, maybe to make sure you're not accidentally insulting somebody somehow, going in there with some humility and listen and not try to go in there like you're here to solve the world's problems. Might be better off dealing with people in the South. You can solve the world's problems after you've been there 2 weeks.
Well, Greg, I think it took me about 5 years for them to stop calling me the Yankee when I came south.
Yeah, watch out who you're joking around with too. That's another lesson.
Yes, yeah. And I think this goes into Claire's question. So I'm going to ask Claire to unmute herself and come on video and ask this next one. So I threw that in because of Claire's question.
Hi. Yeah, so I'll probably not come on video this time. I've been cleaning my house, so I look pretty bad. But anyway, yeah, so my question is, so what are some of the most common faux pas that you've seen, maybe, young professionals committing, or, or anyone else for that matter, that you find particularly annoying or aggravating?
Well, I'll tell you this, that there's a misconception,
ahead,
I think. Thank you. I'm sorry. There's a misconception, I think, that, and you just kind of hear this story told over the years that the new person comes in from a degree, with a degree and is here to solve the problems, and the old timers who've done it forever feel they're being disrespected. I personally think it's the other way around. I think the new person a lot of time comes in wanting to help and learn, and it's the people that's been there forever are the ones that are disrespectful, because this person hasn't paid their dues and hasn't been there long enough and hasn't been there for 30 years and seen all the things go up and down. So I would say taking things personally, when it's work, you have to learn to work with people, and it's not as easy as it sounds going into the private industry. So I would say try to go in there and not get offended at little things. There's going to be people coming into the industry now that they want a work-life balance more than what the previous generation wanted. They were pushing to move up the chain and be successful, and now there's people coming in there to negotiate vacation time and I want to be home by 5. That doesn't necessarily work, So I'd say I've seen it go both ways, but I would say go in there with humility, and be willing to be adaptable and flexible is probably the best advice, because I do think there's inadvertent faux pas that can happen when you're the new person coming in there that you're not even aware of yet. But that lack of respect, I think, that the old time people think they are getting, it's not even there. You just got to not be offended by it, because if they react, you didn't mean anything by it. That was a rambling answer, but that was what was in my mind.
I would say one thing that when I started at Smithfield, that was more related to the production research at that time. And people would talk to me, yeah, it would be nice if we test this and that and that. And I would go and talk to my boss and ask him, we've done that. So then he started showing me, and I got to the link that we had on the server that had all the things that they were tested before. So I went and started looking at the data. So that made my life a little bit easier. Otherwise, you start repeating the same thing over and over and over and over. And there were ideas that they would come back again about every 3 or 4 years. So, which was interesting, but every 3 or 4 years, the same questions would come up. And they forgot that they have already listened about it. So you have to be open and
I'll write this down though. Pet peeve of Anna.
Huh?
It's been done already.
Yeah, you have to find a mentor wherever you go, inside or outside the company, but those will help you to move forward. Absolutely.
Say, for me, in thinking about the question of common faux pas, they kind of fall in two categories. The first is that if you're someone working as tech service in allied industry, there's a natural tendency to think you are coming with the answer that will fit everybody, when the reality is you need to be asking questions of that customer, because there may be something unique that idea number one will never work in, but maybe idea two will. So the asking of questions and understanding what the needs of the user might be, you know, whether it's another part of your company or a client of your company, that ability to question and maybe even look at leading questions where you want to get them to talk to you and draw out what might be needed information for you. And so for me, as I've seen fresh grads come into the business, they don't always think about that ability of questioning as a way of getting ideas percolating.
Yeah.
And
And listening.
Yeah, and listening, exactly. And the other bucket, I guess, is the follow-up with the client on outlining what you're doing. So that can be if you've had a phone call and promised to send information, try and get it done as timely as possible. You know, if you're going to visit a client in their office, you know, dress appropriate business casual, and don't show up in too casual or too dressy, depending on what the code is for that business, because both are differing of off-putting for the room, so to speak. So, you know, just think about what it is that you're there to try and do with that client, and dress, act appropriately, do the right follow-ups, even if it's somebody internal. Get it done as timely as possible. And don't be shy about saying, I don't know, because a colleague or a client will know if you are trying to pull the light over them because you really don't know, but you just want to sound like you do. So sometimes those three words, I don't know, frank, honest, and forthright, and then they can be followed up, but I'll look into that for you.
Yeah. I had a teacher that he was a pathologist at school, that I remember him. He was the oldest in their team, and he was very clear, very easy. We would ask questions to him, and in the class, he's like, I don't know, I'm going to look for it, and next class we'll talk about it. So that made me learn very early. No, if you don't know, you don't know. You are not born knowing everything. You are here to learn, and you're going to learn until the day you die. So don't worry about that.
I've got one more. I have, and I'm going to be the biggest hypocrite in the world to say this, but when you're in a meeting, put your phone down. I was the customer for the first 16 years of my career, and I've had people trying to talk to me, and I'd put my phone down. I'd pick it back up immediately and be texting with somebody else. obviously not good. That's a faux pas. So when I go in a lot of sales meetings now, I'll tell whoever I'm with on the technical team that I've got 2 rules I want to follow is don't start talking about work until I start talking about work, and don't interrupt the customer.
And one very important one here that I think nobody can forget this. There are some customers that they will tell you, I don't want to talk about this. And if they don't want to talk about something,
Drop it.
don't force that, because you might not be reinvited to come back.
Yeah, that's an excellent one, Anna, because you may never get another visit with that customer.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen that happen many times. And I just look at the person as like, stop. And the person would not stop. It's like, come on, really? Doesn't work that way, you know?
Janet, you brought up a good point, attire, and I wanted to kind of address this today a little bit. And another thing I thought it was very interesting, same podcast about language, but mothers and daughters. And mothers, and I never noticed this about my mom until I listened to this, but you know, mothers are probably pretty harsh on their daughters of how they look. And she was saying, you know, because women are judged by how they look. And I've heard not only on a leadership podcast from John Maxwell and stuff about women not looking a certain way. And sorry, Greg, I'm not trying to offend you, but I think this goes into men as well. Attire, how do you mentioned, how do you know going in? And we'll use Tyson for example. They've kind of changed their culture a little bit, but every employee used to wear khakis. And now they can wear some other attire and stuff. And so you got clients like that. Then I worked at Colnback. You know, I got lucky where I still thought it was pretty bad. I had to wear dress slacks out in the feed mill or taking care of my chickens on the research trial. But we had a very formal office policy, you know, and I guess for when they started Colnback, even women had to wear skirts, for instance, and men with suits and ties and things like that. So you look at the shift in culture over time. And then, of course, I go to the European companies and they seem to be more casual or, you know, international, a little more casual at times. How do you know attire, what's appropriate, what's not? How do you, and Greg, as from your viewpoint, you know, men and women working together, maybe what makes you uncomfortable or in that respect?
I'll tell you one specific example, not to go into too much detail, but there was an employee and she worked in shipping at my previous employer. And, you know, you can kind of Google what's appropriate and get an idea. Well, she was being very, it was almost distracting, and it got more distracting. And of course, my answer to people who complained was, you know, so what? You know, focus on work. What she wears her business. Well, after a while, you know, it got to where there was some uncomfortable conversations had to be had with that, and you know, there's a lot at play when you go on when everybody spends more time at work than they do at home, and there's issues there's real issues that arise, and I don't know what the right answer is other than my repeated mantra to people was, so what? You've got to focus on your own thing. And that maybe that was getting myself out of a crucial conversation that we had to have at some point. But when I sat down with her and told her what the feedback was from several people, and she made a change. I don't think she was trying to be distracting, but it was not the norm of what somebody would think this was okay, you know. And some of the other women were more offended than the men were. So it's a you know, uniforms. I worked at Tyson for 7.5 years. The khaki made things simpler, you know. So I don't know what the right answer is going forward, but we're gonna have to just try to decide that as a society.
Well, I know pajamas are not considered even business casual.
Definitely not. Nor flip-flops.
Not flip-flops, yes.
Unless you're
No.
showered in the hog barn, but you know.
Yeah.
True. True. Yeah, yeah. I've been in some of those hog barns. You need flip-flops in those showers. I think as I think about the question, you can ask if you're a new person coming in and never called on that account. Usually there's a sales rep or somebody else that will know what is typical attire for that particular client's operation. Now, when it comes to personal dress, you know, there's dressing attractively that is business casual, but you're not there to be anything other than intelligently attractive.
Yeah.
So how you want to dress during your workday and how you dress going out in the evening with friends, two different things, or boyfriends or husbands or whatever. And that's probably the most important consideration is you want to dress attractively, but you want to have your intelligence be the leading factor they recognize about you in the workplace.
You want people that they are with you in a meeting, that they are listening to what you are saying,
Correct.
not what you are dressing.
Correct.
That is the main thing for me. One other thing that is, if you're going to visit a feed mill, you don't go wearing skirt. Sorry, doesn't work that way.
No, it
You
doesn't.
have to have closed shoes. You have to cover your body because they will not let you in because it's a security issue. Okay, so you cannot do that.
And lifting a skirt, you'd be an accident waiting to happen. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
And I'm going to keep going on this a little bit. We got a few minutes. We work in a very conservative industry, I would still say. I mean, we're changing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a lot more people with more tattoos, more piercings. How do you think some of those are they becoming more accepted? Are they a challenge? I know piercings from like a plant is bad, or a hog barn, because we can't wear jewelry.
Yeah.
Because of safety for the animals and food safety and things. But how are some of those things should be considered? Because tattoos are permanent.
Yeah.
Do you think people still judge, as you said, dress intelligently if we made some bad decisions with our tattoos or piercings? Do those make people look less intelligent?
I would tell you, I had a colleague in graduate school that he works today. He works with pet food today, and he is tattooed from here down. He had ears, rings. His tongue had rings. But when he would go to a meeting, he would take his rings, put a suit, and it's like, you're just fine. Everything is covered. So he showed that he was smart. And that's what put him in the right direction. So if whatever you have in your body that it is tattoos, but you are showing everybody that you have what is needed for the position that you are being there doing it, you'll be fine. It's like do you know Dr. Rebecca Robbins? That was at Seaboard. Now that she moved. She has tattoos also, but she was super well respected. And this was not today. There has been several years ago, almost 10 years ago. So I think it's changing. Of course, you'll find still people that will be against it, but these are their own choices. If you are in a big company, nobody's going to say anything to you. If you are in a small company, that might be different.
So going back to pick maybe the culture company you want to work in.
There's definitely a generational difference in thought process on seeing that ebb away. Piercings are certainly a bit different challenge, simply because you would never want to wear a lot of bright, shiny jewelry into a turkey barn, because I guarantee you, you do not want 20-week toms coming after you because they find your jewelry attractive. No. So safety reasons and animal management reasons aside, I think the barriers are coming down on those, but it will depend very much on the culture of that specific company, of whether or not it would be an internal bias or not.
Do we have any last minute thoughts, comments for the audience? That's where you're.
I would say that keep your mind open and find people wherever you're going to work, where you are working, that you can talk to and make questions, even like simple questions in terms of what am I supposed to dress here? Or is there any definition of what is the clothes that I have to wear here? Because like at Smithfield, there was in the book of all the things for the employees, there was the specification what you are supposed to dress in the offices and every place. So there you go.
I think that brings up a good point. Janet mentioned a mentor, I think Greg's as well, but I don't know necessarily on etiquette if it always has to be, like a mentor. I think everybody needs a mentor, but a friend that you can have in the company that's been there to know, right, and help guide you.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes in the interview, if you're only meeting, and this is the problem with virtual interviews, because you don't learn culture, you don't learn etiquette. I think it's important that if you can get into the office buildings with different staff or meet multiple people, see how they interact with each other, see their etiquette, and say, do I fit with this?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. When I would say that the more people that you talk about when you go to work somewhere, I think that is the best way to ask them how they feel about the different situations, how it is to handle, like when you have situations that they are dual, that they are not really one side or the other, how those situations are handled within the company, how things are done. So that can help you also a little bit. Duality.
Greg, Janet, last closing thoughts?
Yeah, use your network to help you understand.
I would say.
Culture. Sorry, Greg. And the other thing I would put out there is don't be afraid to ask some of those questions, even in the interview process, because a lot of companies have what they call core values or some equivalent term that will give you a sense of how they view culture within the company.
Greg?
Just general advice going forward. Learning to communicate with some precision. You're going to have 1,000 critical conversations at your job every year that you're going through this, and I've experienced a lot of people that would use the wrong word or not precisely describe what they were going through. It was a personal problem or a problem with an employee or a work issue. So I would say learn how to articulate what you think and feel in all these conversations, and just be honest and be willing to.
That is great closing remarks. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you again, Danisco Animal Nutrition within IFF. We couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you. And reach out. This team's here to help support. Use your network within Coffee and Careers. And, there's always probably a lot of good jobs too within IFF. So thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Casey, for the opportunity. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.